Hello everyone. We are from Group 6 and we will be discussing about the performance measurement, accountability, and good governance. These are three interlinked pillars that shape the effectiveness and integrity of public institutions. This discussion explores how governments use performance metrics not only to assess outcomes but also to promote transparency, learning, and trust. By examining theory and practice, we aim to understand how these principles can translate into meaningful public value and sustainable governance. To start with, here is our first discussant.
Hello everyone, my name is Janina Madrid and I will be discussing the first topic for this session entitled Foundations of Performance Measurement. To start, performance measurement is the systematic collection of information on government performance. Historically, it began as accounting and budgeting, but over time, governments expanded its use toward reforms like managing for results and value for money. Gao, in her 2015 article entitled Performance Measurement and Management in the Public Sector, Some Lessons from Research Evidence, emphasizes a key shift. That is, from measurement to management. This means that what matters is not just producing numbers, but actually using data to make better decisions. Like for example, in education, test scores alone are no longer enough. Schools now combine dropout rates, teacher training data, and parent surveys to guide management choices, among others. Now, governments measure performance for several core reasons. First, for transparency. Citizens demand to know if government services are actually delivered. If yes, for how long? And then we have accountability, where agencies publish ratings of government offices like, for example, hospitals or schools to show how resources allocated for them are being used. Resource allocation is also important because budgets can be shifted toward programs with better outcomes based on data. Service improvement comes in when the public sector uses feedback from the clients to redesign or streamline their processes. Ben, in the 2003 article, Why Measure Performance? Different Purposes Require Different Measures, stresses that these are central to public trust. While Gao, on the other hand, adds that citizen participation, such as surveys, has become an important part of assessing government responsiveness. Ben identifies 8 distinct purposes, each requiring different measures. Number 1, evaluate. So for example, the Civil Service Commission assessing HR programs. Then number 2, we have control, when environmental agencies using air or water quality indices to enforce compliance. Number 3, budget. The DSWD or Department of Social Welfare and Development using cost per beneficiary data to decide which subsidies to scale. Number 4, motivate. Barangay health workers, for example, posting vaccination coverage to encourage performance. Number 5, promote. When a city publishes its 95% garbage collection rate to build citizen trust. Number 6, celebrate. For example, a province holding ceremonies when it wins a disaster risk reduction award. Number 7, learn. When, for example, the Department of Education analyzing weak math results to adjust teacher training. And then lastly, improve. For example, hospitals adopting balanced scorecards to align finances, processes, and patient satisfaction. So Ben's key insight is that no single performance measure can serve all purposes. For example, a measure that works for accountability, like publishing hospital mortality rates, might demotivate staff if taken out of context, or a measure that promotes success, like awards, may not actually improve long term performance. Gao reinforces this by showing that reforms yield both gains and distortions. Transparency improves, but risks like gaming overload and red tape also appear. So, what can we take away from these points? Number one, we have to clarify the purpose first. Decide whether the goal is evaluation, motivation, or learning before choosing measures. Second, use both objective and subjective measures. Numbers like processing times are important, but citizen surveys on satisfaction are also equally valuable. Lastly, focus on performance management, not just measurement. Collecting data is not the end goal. The real value is in using information improvement and decision making. So, to conclude, Ben reminds us that measures must match intent. We cannot rely on a single indicator to do everything. Gao shows that reforms succeed only when performance information is actually used in management, not just reported. But more importantly, they remind us that performance measurement is both technical and political. It provides data, but it also reflects choices about what to value, who to hold accountable, and how to govern. That's it for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone. I will be discussing performance-based accountability, theory versus practice, one of the most popular approaches in public sector reform. While the idea of measuring performance to improve management and accountability sounds appealing, Paul Thomas showed that its practice is far more complicated than the theory suggests. If you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. Captures the core idea of performance-based accountability. The belief is that once something can be measured, it becomes easier to manage, improve, and hold officials responsible. In theory, measurement provides clarity and focus to public organizations dealing with complex goals. It also promises a rational way of proving whether programs are working. Thomas points out, however, that this logic is persuasive but overly simplistic, since politics and values shape public programs. Still, this slogan explains why PMMA became so appealing to many governments. Performance Measurement, Management, and Accountability, or PMMA, was widely promoted because of the promises it offered. First, it claimed to align measures directly with policy goals and program objectives, making government work more targeted and consistent. Second, it promised greater efficiency and effectiveness in how resources were used while also helping to rebuild public trust. Advocates describe it as a way to show clearly whether programs were delivering results. In this sense, PMMA was seen as the equivalent of the bottom line in the private sector, much like profit is for businesses. These promises explain why governments were eager to adopt PMMA as a central tool of reform. So why does governments adopt PMMA? PMMA became a global trend in public management reforms during the 1990s and 2000s. Governments were searching for new ways to demonstrate results and improve performance. One major driver was fiscal stress and limited resources, which pushed leaders to justify spending and prioritize programs more carefully. Another was the growing public demand for results, as citizens wanted proof that policies were actually delivering benefits. At the same time, declining trust in government created pressure to show transparency and accountability. To respond, many countries adopted PMMA reforms. In the United States, the Government Performance and Results Act, or GPRA, required agencies to set goals and report outcomes. In the United Kingdom, the Best Value Initiative aimed to ensure local governments provided quality services at reasonable cost. In Canada, results-based management tied performance indicators directly to planning and budgeting. These international examples showed how PMMA became a preferred approach for governments facing both financial constraints and public skepticism. Despite its appeal, performance-based accountability has proven difficult to apply in practice. One challenge is the difficulty of measuring outcomes compared to outputs. Outputs, like the number of services delivered, are easy to count, but outcomes, such as improved health or education, are much harder to capture. Another issue is the attribution problem. Since results are usually shaped by many actors and outside factors beyond government control. Even when data is collected, there is often a utilization gap, meaning performance information is not used in real decision making. On top of this, agencies sometimes track too many indicators, creating information overload. These challenges limit the usefulness of performance systems and show why managing with data is more complicated than it appears. Performance-based accountability is not just a technical exercise. It is also deeply political. The choice of what to measure is never neutral, because measures reflect values and priorities. Often, performance indicators are used symbolically to demonstrate legitimacy rather than to drive real reform. In practice, traditional accountability through scandals, mismanagement, and blame still dominates public life. This shows that performance reports hardly replace older political patterns of judgment. There is also a tension between results-based accountability, which emphasizes outcomes, and procedural accountability, which focuses on rules and compliance. These political realities explain why PBA often falls short on its promise in practice. In summary, PMMA is appealing in theory but difficult in practice. Technical problems like defining outcomes and political factors, such as symbolic use of measures, limit its effectiveness. To make it work, governments must balance technical rigor with political realities. A realistic approach avoids both blind faith in numbers and cynicism that dismisses them as meaningless. Instead, the true value of PMMA lies in supporting learning, better decisions, and stronger accountability for good governance.
Hello everyone, this is Jacqueline Tanawit and I will be discussing the politics of performance and accountability. Discussed in the previous section, PMMA stands for Performance Management, Measurement, and Accountability. The aim of PMMA is to improve the effectiveness of public sector by linking the gap between measurement of results, decision-making, learning, and accountability. A promising aim that ensures a measured and reported result, leading to government efficiency, transparency, effectiveness, and high trust value from the public. In the government, politics play a crucial role in defining success or failure. In real-world practice, the achievement of public programs is defined through politics, not by evidence. It is interpreted through political stance of parties involved and not by evidence output. The result depends on the narrative of parties who have larger control on the competition and dynamics of an institution, thus affecting the outcome of accountability. Reason to this is because the goals of the government are vague and varies. Performance report becomes a battleground where players and implementers involved interpret based on organizational political interest and expectations. Measuring outcomes is the holy grail of performance management. To measure this, frameworks are made to assess the performance of a program and an organization. The most common framework are the three E's: the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. Economy inquires about costs, efficiency about production and output, and effectiveness checks if the objectives are met without undue consequences. Performance measurement and performance management are two distinct processes. Performance measurement measures the strategic planning of public organizations and program plans, while the performance management uses performance information for a number of purposes. To analyze this, the 3D framework or the three dimensions of accountability is used as an analytical tool applied to analyze the pressure, expectation, and interpretation of accountability, explaining why performance-based accountability is attractive in theory but difficult in practice. Diagnosis identifies the problem or redefines an existing problem. Design, formulate new solutions and adopts new strategies. And development, implement change to learn from experience. Performance management, measurement, and accountability is often used as symbolic rather than substantive, serving political interest more than accountability. Transparency and responsibility are demonstrated rhetorically, but fall short in real practice. This reiterates the gap between accountability in theory and in practice. PMMA is also introduced to shift accountability from procedural accountability or rules of compliance to results-based accountability or outcomes, with an aim to make the government to be more effective, transparent, and responsive. However, the practice of procedural accountability remains more dominant as the government are still held accountable. Thus, result-based accountability remains symbolic. In a nutshell, while the intention is good to promote legitimacy, PMMA functions symbolically rather than substantive, resulting to limited impact to none on genuine learning and decision-making. Despite the efforts in introducing PMMA and shifting of accountability, procedural accountability still persists, leading to government being held accountable for compliance and error avoidance rather than delivery of substantive outcome. The introduction of PMMA is ideal in aiming with good intention to strengthening transparency and responsiveness, but the result is highly affected when it is being highly politicized, resulting to compromise legitimacy and public trust.
To continue, Topic 4 is learning from success and failure in public policy. The discussion will cover the writings of Alan McConnell in his book Learning from Success and Failure in Rutledge Handbook of Public Policy. Understanding the dynamics of policy success and failure is crucial for effective governance and societal progress. This presentation, inspired by Alan McConnell's insights, delves into the intricate nature of policy outcomes. Join us as we explore why distinguishing between success and failure is rarely straightforward and how we can learn from both. Public policies affect everything from healthcare to education, but not all policies work perfectly. Sometimes, they succeed in some ways but fail in others. Today, we'll explore how we can learn from both success and failure to make better policies. Public policies are designed with good intentions, yet the real-world impact often diverges from expectations. This paradox highlights the need for continuous learning and adaptation. One challenge that success means different things to different people. A policy might reduce crime but increase costs. Also, some successes takes years to show up, while failures might be obvious right away. So defining success or failure is complex. Evaluating public policy requires a comprehensive lens, moving beyond simple binary judgments to embrace the full spectrum of outcomes and impacts. McConnell breaks down policy outcomes into three areas: the process of making policy, the programs that deliver services, and the political environment. A policy can succeed in one area but fail in another, which complicates the evaluation. These three realms are deeply interconnected. A breakdown in one can significantly impact the others, emphasizing the holistic nature of policy evaluation. Instead of just success or failure, policies often fall somewhere on a spectrum. Some succeed strongly and last, others have mixed or fragile success, and some clearly fail. Recognizing this helps us understand the real impact. By embracing the nuanced understanding of policy outcomes, from resilient success to outright failure, we can foster a culture of continuous learning and adaptation, paving the way for more impactful and responsible public policy that strive to learn from every outcome, building a future shaped by thoughtful and effective governance.
Hello everyone, I am your last discussant for this presentation and I'll be talking about integrating performance, accountability, and good governance. Three viewpoints will be used: Robert Ben's thoughts on why performance is measured, Paul Thomas' criticism of performance-based accountability in practice, and Alan McConnell's observations on learning and adaptation in governance as reported by Araral and colleagues in the Routledge Handbook of Public Policy. The central question is, how can governments use performance measurement as an effective instrument for learning and development rather than merely as a bureaucratic ritual? As Robert Ben 2003 points out, and as discussed a while ago, there are several uses for performance measurement. He recognized at least 8: to evaluate outcomes, to control operations, to justify budgets, to motivate employees, to promote programs to stakeholders, to celebrate achievements, to learn what works, and to improve services. The main idea is that various goals call for various actions. As an example, if employee motivation is the objective, you may emphasize progress indicators that demonstrate progress over time. If evaluation is the goal, you would need more comprehensive outcome-based data. Governments run the risk of using a single set of indicators for all of these uses. This leads to misunderstandings, inflated expectations, and even mathematical manipulations. According to Ben, it's equally as crucial to understand why we measure as it is to understand what we measure. The limitations of performance-based accountability are the opposite side of the issue, as highlighted by Paul Thomas 2007. As discussed a while ago, theoretically, performance-based accountability seems outstanding. It offers objectivity, transparency, and improved decision-making. However, it faces significant obstacles in real-world situations. First, there is the conflict between political realities and technical rigors. Citizens and politicians often request for straightforward performance metrics. Real performance, however, is complex, multifaceted, and impacted by numerous outside influences. Second, gaming and unexpected consequences can affect performance systems. Agencies may overlook equally significant but unmeasured areas of performance in favor of concentrating merely on what is being measured. Accountability may become a routine rather than a meaningful process if others create data only to meet reporting requirements. Lastly, Thomas points out that since public institutions deal with complicated contexts, accountability frequently works better in principle than in practice. Measurement by itself cannot address fundamental structural or political issues. In the Routledge Handbook of Public Policy, Araral et al. 2013, Alan McConnell outlines a point that government should to be viewed as an adaptive process. Policies must adapt to changing circumstances. They are not permanent solutions. Importantly, organizations should learn from mistakes as well as from accomplishments. When failures are freely admitted, they reveal important details about what doesn't work. The difficulty lies in creating a culture that perceives making mistakes as a learning opportunity rather than a punishment. This calls for institutionalized feedback loops, which are systems that continuously gather, consider, and incorporate performance data into decision making. For instance, adaptive management techniques, evaluation systems, and frequent policy reviews all contribute to learning becoming an established routine instead of an occasional response. Toward good governance. First and foremost, transparency is important. Governments gain the trust of their constituents and other interested parties when they openly provide performance data. Being transparent implies being honest and accountable, not being perfect. Secondly, learning must be institutionalized by governments. This entails integrating adaptation, feedback, and reflection within the governance framework itself. Participatory assessments, evidence-based policymaking, and adaptive management techniques are a few examples. Lastly, we should have realistic expectations. Performance evaluation is not an all-encompassing tool. Uncertainty, complexity, and politics cannot be eliminated. Rather, it should be viewed as a roadmap, a means of guiding choices, promoting learning, and progressively enhancing results. Key takeaways. First, make sure that performance measurements accurately represent your goals, as no single statistic can capture everything. Forcing one may distort the results. Next, maintain a balance between reality and rigor. The efficacy of performance-based accountability is limited by political pressures, gaming, and ritual conformity despite its ideal appearance and principle. Finally, approach the government as a process of education. Transparency should be used to increase public trust, improve feedback loops, and direct adaptation. When taken as a whole, they demonstrate that performance evaluation has to be more than just a numerical exercise. It should be a tool for accountability, trust, and good governance.
In conclusion, performance measurement, accountability, and good governance together form the foundation of effective and transparent public service. When applied thoughtfully, they promote learning, trust, and continuous improvement in government. These are our references, and thank you for joining us in this discussion.